Yeah, thank you so much. What an honor to be able to speak with you today, and I'm so glad we finally got out, that I was able to get out here to Kentucky to visit with you. I'm going to shift gears a little bit today. What an outstanding presentation that was before, wasn't it? Just inspiring research, I think, is really good. And that's going to be hard to follow, but I'm going to shift gears and talk about ranching in general a little bit. And Dr. Jones had asked me to talk about really strategic decisions in an evolving industry. And man, is this industry ever evolving. It's just amazing in my career what I've seen change. And I think, that's going to be a message that we have to present, that we have to contend with as we are involved in this industry, is we have to be able to see what's in front of us and be able to change with it. Now, I do have a PhD, but I promise you that has zero street credibility at the ranch. I think most people there think it stands for post hole digger, so I get no accolades for that. I'm going to speak to you as a rancher today, and I think the first thing, if we get this going, I wanted to just challenge us that we need to be constantly evaluating our systems, being able to understand what is going to be the next challenges that we face in our industry. And I think there's going to be many of them. There's going to be externalities. We've gone through in our operation a strategic planning process where we sat down and we talked about, okay, what are the major assumptions? What are the major assumptions that we're operating under that, if those assumptions were wrong, would be detrimental to our business long term? Have you ever thought about that? What are the assumptions that we're operating under that, if we're wrong about those assumptions, it would be detrimental to our business? And are there strategic hedges and metrics that we need to be making in our business to prepare for that eventuality? And they've got to be realistic, and so it's been pretty fun to go through that process. I think the amount of capital outlay today in ranching is so tremendous that the risk is going up. Yeah, the market's pretty good right now. Those of us in the cow-calf industry should be making some money, but the risk has gone up as well, and the risk of failure has gone up. I think we cannot afford not to plan, and I think that's where we're going to go. I'm going to give you a little background on Padlock. We operate in northern Wyoming and southern Montana, kind of along the Bighorn Mountains, right on the border. We have units, in fact, most of the ranch is actually in Montana. Just a commercial cow-calf operation. Our genetics back in the 1960s, like so many, started with purebred Herefords. The ranch was founded in '43 and really started crossbreeding in the 1960s. And now it's basically an Angus and Sim-Angus base. And so we're actually developing our own crossbred bulls that are Sim-Angus and stabilizer bulls that we're putting back on this crossbred cow herd. And we, as part of that system, we also have a farming operation. Yes, this is corn in northern Wyoming. Now it's 85-day corn, but we can put up routinely 28 to 30 ton corn silage in northern Wyoming. Grain corn, the water requirement's a little expensive to get it that long, and part of it's just a short season. But we have our farming operation is really forage based. It's hay and silages. We put up haylage early, we put up dry hay in the middle of summer, put up corn silage in the fall, and then Lord willing, if we have the water, we'll put up some more haylage in the spring. Those products go to support our cow-calf operation, but also a grow yard that we have. So we calve in May and June. Most of the cattle will calve in May of the year, and we'll talk about that a little bit today as to why we do that. We're really trying to match what God gives us from forage production to the animal requirements in our environment as best we can. But then we wean fairly lightweight calves in the fall and make yearlings out of them, feeding them hay and silage, right? And we use some corn and distiller's grains to augment that and selling yearlings in the spring of the year. There's also a finishing cattle component. We finish some cattle at home in our feed yard over the summer. And then we feed commercially in other places like Nebraska, opportunistically. I would say our main product, though, coming out is probably 850-pound steers, March to May, and 800-pound heifers in that same time period. And we always have that decision point. Do we feed them? Do we go ahead and sell them? Do we take them back to grass? They take some of the lighter ones back and run them on grass and those type of things. But kind of with that background of this ranching operation in the Northern Rockies, I think this is probably the coolest thing that we get to talk about, is that our whole deal is based on ranching with a purpose. And so this came about with some parallel planning between the ownership, it's a family-owned business, between the family owners and the management to say, what are we in this for? What are we here for? And basically came up with these interrelated 5 elements of purpose that we don't use the word sustainability, but that we feel like we have to be excellent in these areas for this ranch to be around for perpetuity. Isn't that what sustainability is about? And we see that as having excellent people, having healthy and improving natural resources. We have to be profitable. You do not have to be embarrassed about being profitable to be sustainable. We cannot go to our owners that are now in their 5th generation of ownership and say we want a capital call. They're not going to do it. And so if we want this to be sustainable, we've got to make money. We'll spend a fair bit of time on that today. We want to be a positive member of our community. That's why we're involved in our local associations, our cattlemen's associations, national cattlemen's associations. It's why we host interns at the ranch. It's why we do tours. It's why I can get off the ranch and go speak about this without deviating from our mission. It's about educating and helping our industry get better. I'm just passionate about this industry improving and surviving. I just think we have one of the most amazing industries that we get to be a part of. And we get to be part of something bigger than ourselves, right? We're part of this food production. We're part of this conservation ethic in ranching. We have a lot to be proud of. And so we want to be able to share that and advance that and learn with you. And man, I told Gordon earlier, I said the one thing I've learned as I've advanced in my career is the things that I used to think I knew a lot about, I realize now that I didn't know very much about it. And so we're just constantly learning and growing. And then don't forget the family, this family emblem component. We could spend this entire talk on either one of these, but I'm gonna touch on all of these today, and I just hope it stimulates some thought for you. Let's talk about people a little bit. I think the first thing that I think about with people is that we want to create a culture of excellence. And you say, well, yeah, you hear this word culture all the time. What does that mean? Well, we took a stab at trying to define that and get at that in our business. And you know the way we did it is I went to our management team and some employees that had been there for a while. And I said, just write down every attribute of the people that have been successful at Padlock Ranch over the years, that are successful now or who have been successful. And man, I got these lists from everybody. And then I compiled those lists and got rid of the redundancy and then narrowed it down to some key points and said, man, that's got to be our culture. And part of our culture, one of the attributes of human beings in our business that have been successful is they have this unrelenting desire for excellence, to improve over time. Like failure is not an option. And that kind of passion that people have for that, the people that can learn from their mistakes and move forward, and oh man, do we make mistakes. We're not perfect. Anybody who's ranching and is real with you are making some mistakes, but are you learning from those? I had Dr. Barry Dunn, who's president of South Dakota State University, was on our board of directors for a while. I was actually on faculty with him years ago at SDSU, and he used to tell people, and I think it's so wise, that if you make a management decision and it turns out to be a bad decision, manage it right. Learn from it and manage it right. Don't double down. And it's that kind of a relentless pursuit of getting better all the time, learning and moving forward. I think one of the things that we are not very good at in our industry is finding people that fit the culture that we're trying to establish in our business, trying to maintain. You don't create culture. Culture kind of is what it is, but you don't want people to come in and wreck it. And those people that are not successful usually don't fit your culture. And one of the things that we've learned over time is we've got to get better at interviewing. And I really stunk at that for a long time. And my interview, if you came in and interviewed with me and you're sitting there across, here's my approach. I'm going to tell you all about the ranch. I'm so proud of it. I'm going to tell you about our business. And then I'm going to say, man, we want somebody who really, say we're hiring a cowboy who really is concerned about low-stress livestock handling and keeping cattle without a lot of pressure on them so they can stay healthy and so on. And then ask them, say, hey, do you agree with low-stress livestock handling? Unless they're an idiot, they're going to say yes. And so we're trying to change our interview process. Burke Tykert asked me about, probably 7 or 8 years ago. He said, where are you at, do you think, professionally in your human resource progression in life? And I said, well, I used to be about a 1 out of 10, and now I'm about a 3.5 out of 10. And so we're not there, but we're trying to get better. But we've started trying to do professional interviews where we sit down and I want to get to know the people. I'm going to ask them questions about themselves, open-ended questions about their background, about their interpersonal skills. And then we get into some proficiency things. But boy, attitude is so important. Attitude is so important. And I'll give you just a real quick example on that. We had one scenario where I was sitting there talking to a guy, and boy, he was interviewing really well. He's a good talker. And that's the other thing, by the way, is you got to be able to separate between somebody who's a good interviewer and a good person. So you really want to get at who is this human being? And we at the end of the interview, we're just chit-chatting, and he's asking about fishing in the area. And I'm like, man, the Tongue River right here has got great brown trout fishing, but we just do that as catch and release only, but we can sure let employees fish there. And his answer and his comment to me was, well, that's stupid. I don't really believe in catch and release. What did that tell me about his attitude, right? I just learned something in kind of an informal chit-chat that he's going to think a lot of things we do is probably stupid. And so, man, we want somebody who can fit that culture of want to learn. We do not expect people to be puppets, though. We want people to bring in new ideas and different styles. We're good with all that. But we just want them to fit that culture. And then the big thing, too, is in reinforce those attributes in your communication with them and your evaluation of employees. Incentivize them in the right areas, right? That's really, really important. I think leadership, and you look at that in a business, is that you have to be able to paint a vision. You have to be able to communicate, this is where we want our business to go. And when you do that, you can paint that vision, you can begin to build consensus around it. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't take input from everybody. I make very few unilateral decisions in my business. I have a team, I rely on a lot of input. But if I have a vision, I'm going to paint that vision and I'm going to build consensus for it. I think that's really important. You have to establish trust. Now, this is if it's just you and your son, you and your son-in-law, you and your daughter, your cousin, your uncle, or a hired employee or an assistant manager. You have to be able to have some degree of trust where you can be real with each other, where you can challenge each other. If you don't have that trust, people are much less likely to have conflict. And when we have our staff meetings, we had one the other day, and we were talking about something that's a really important decision, and I didn't have any dissenters. And I'm like, somebody's got to dissent against this decision, and because I want to hear the other side of it, and I want them to feel comfortable and trust each other enough that they can do that. And the other thing is, we have to look at this as a continual investment. We talk about investing in our land and our equipment. You have to invest in human beings, invest time. And man, it's getting more expensive too. And we have to realize that. We'll talk about costs in a little bit, but we have to be able to provide people with a lifestyle that they can be comfortable living in from a monetary standpoint. All right, so we had that people component. I'm going to shift gears into natural resources. This is one I could get super excited about. I get excited about all this, but you know, for us, again, this is kind of like we started. It's about good planning and setting things up. What we're wanting to do in our system is, I think of a plant in the spring of the year. Now, we have a lot shorter season than you guys. We'll start getting our first sprigs of green grass middle of April. We don't have much until early May. Fall can be hit or miss, whether we have green grass, depending on the weather. It's not uncommon for us to freeze at Memorial Day, and it's not uncommon for us to freeze at Labor Day. And so it can be a fairly short season. But I think of this plant that shoots up a tiller in the spring of the year. What has that plant done? It's gone into the roots, and he's borrowed the nutrients from that roots to shoot up that tiller. Think about that as a factory. If you went in and you borrowed the money from the bank to build a factory, okay, and a tornado comes along and blows the factory away, and you haven't produced anything yet from your factory, you go back to the bank and, okay, I got some insurance money, but I'm going to need to borrow some more money or to go back to rebuild this factory, and it gets blown down again. Finally, the bank says, no mas, not gonna happen anymore. What about the roots of those plants? If a cow comes along and grazes those repeatedly while they're growing, and especially in the heterogeneous kind of rangelands that we deal with, you'll have certain species in certain areas like lowland areas that come on quicker. The feed grows quicker in the spring. They'll come in, they'll graze that, and then they'll maybe start moving off to the side hills. But then while that lowland area regrows, they come back and graze that again. They're regrazing that over and over and over. And they've depleted the bank. The roots get very shallow. You're not very tolerant to drought, and it creates a lot of problems. Now, like Dr. Jones said, I was concerned, like, man, our environment in the Northern Rockies is a lot different than in Kentucky, but I hope you can glean the principles out of here. I think the principles are the same. And if you understand that, I think it's important. Water management's a huge deal for us, and I can't emphasize the importance of appropriate stocking. Appropriate stocking does not mean understocking. It means you're adequately stocked, but you're not degrading the rangeland. And always remember that stocking rate is not animal numbers. It's not animal numbers. It's animal numbers times time divided by the land base, by acres. That's stocking rate. And so you can adjust stocking rate by getting cattle off. You can adjust stocking rate by feeding cattle, moving them to other areas, and so on. I think that's an important concept that we think about a lot. I'd love to talk to you about how we've worked through some of our drought planning in the past along those lines. Not going to have time today, but overall, we're looking for range conditions that are improving. We want, there's some of them that we feel like we got good range conditions. There's others that have been typically fairly heavily infested with annuals, and we're wanting to remove those annuals. How do we do that? Higher intensity grazing early, like when these cheatgrass comes on in the west, that's a big deal. Knock those out and then rest it, let those perennials come back. And we want healthy nutrient cycles. We want water going in the ground. You know what an unintended consequence of good grazing management is, especially in the West, is you have less livestock water. We rely so much on little reservoirs and stock ponds, but as the water goes in the ground, they're not filling as well. And so we've had to invest more in water management. Still think it's a long-term benefit. And certainly reduced erosion, reduced bare ground are some of the things that we're talking about there. Let's talk about profit for a minute. I'm throwing a lot at you at a lot of different angles here today, but I just wanted to give you a synopsis of the weird way that we think on all these interrelated things. I think these are some key areas, folks. Cost management, stocking rate, and marketing. Really, really key to profitability. We know it's in our business. Our operating system and our productivity of our herd is very important. But I put those three at the top. I think back for those of you that have been to Ranching for Profit, and what did they say were the three ways to make a profit in our business? Number one, reduce overheads. 2, improve gross margin. That's reducing your variable cost or improving your revenue by marketing. 3 is increasing turnover. Increasing turnover, throughput through the system. Again, that factory analogy is really important. We'll come back to that. I think one of the largest risks we face, if people say, what keeps you up at night? I'm worried about cost, the way these costs of production have gone up. I don't think we can just hope for continued profitability. We have to plan for it, and you have to understand your cost. And cost management needs constant attention. It's so easy to lose track of that. It's so easy, but we have to be frugal. Now, you talk about a low-cost producer. That doesn't mean a no-cost producer. You just want an ROI on the investment that you're putting in to your herd and to your business. Check this out. Cost of calf at Padlock Ranch. The blue line is what it cost us at weaning. The red line is to get to the end of the year, right? Because we have some fall cost in meds and fall feed during that 45, 60-day weaning period to get to December 31st, just the way we do our accounting. And so they mirror each other. So just look at the red line, which is our cost to produce a calf at the end of the year. This would be a yearling we would sell, say, in the following March, April, May, so on. I was getting pretty cocky there for a while. I looked at this, I'm like, man, we've held our costs pretty steady. We've had noise in it, environmental noise mainly, some mini droughts. But look at what happened in 2020. Good gravy. The cost of production went up for a few reasons. Number one, we got into a drought, so we had to buy a fair bit of hay to keep the herd going. You're like, oh, dang, I thought you're more of a holistic guy. I thought you just sold the herd. Not when the market's fixing to be at the highest in history. Heck no, I'm going to feed our way through that little drought. So I think that's an important point. But also, cost of labor, cost of fuel, cost of fertilizer, cost of contract work, cost of parts, everything went up. I did this super horrible, scary exercise in 2024 after we'd prepared our budget. I went back. We were profitable through the bottom of the cattle cycle. We made money. But I went back and modeled against our 2024 budget the cattle prices that we saw in 2016, 17, 18, and it did not look very good. Okay, but the fact is, we're looking at that. We know where that point is. We've tracked those costs, and we have to manage that, and we're going to be, one of the metrics is, can this market go back to those levels? I think we're going to be in a new trading range, but it's certainly something we want to be watching is those costs. We'll be working on continuing to get our costs down, utilizing available feed where we can to reduce our hay costs, our non-harvested feed costs. We'll constantly evaluating our mix of livestock. I don't ever want to get in the paradigm that this is what we do. If I say this is what we do, it means it's what we're doing. I hope if you have me back here 10 years later, I'm saying, hey, we come up with some new stuff. That's how we kind of want to be. And we want to manage we want to budget, and we want to try to stay within budgets the best we can. And man, one of the things you think about when you have good profitability, like, the cow-calf industry is pretty profitable now, is how do I invest that? I understand that when you invest in capital, I don't care if you're on cash or accrual accounting, you have a realized or unrealized cost of depreciation. And you're going to be paying for some of the stuff you're buying now when the market is not so good. We may be in a new trading range in cattle prices, but we're in a new cost range too. So just be aware of that. It's about buying what you need, not what you want. Continue to be frugal about that. I do not like tax management wagging the dog. I just think that tax management should be part of our strategy, should be part of our thought process, but you're not gonna go broke paying taxes. Let's just be real about that. That means you're making money. And so we'll be careful with those kind of decisions. We plan 5 years out on our capital improvement budget, thinking, man, this tractor we think is gonna need replaced in 3 years from now. This corn chopper is gonna need replaced in 5 years from now. We have an employee home we really need to upgrade out in there too. So we're planning so we can try to space that out. And I think also the big point in this is managing your cash. And just making sure that you're not getting yourself further in debt. I think these are points that we've just reiterating what I just said. I think be realistic. We're not buying $30,000 pickups anymore for ranch trucks. I can't find them. If you've got some down here, well, we may come down and get them, but we're just not finding them. And the ones we're buying, brand new, are not lasting as long. And so we're going to see that go up, and we've got to be prepared for that. Same thing with tractors. Same thing with construction. If you're putting up buildings and so on. At the same time, you don't want to let your infrastructure dwindle. And in times of good cash flow is a time to maybe get out ahead of some needed repairs and improvements in your operation. But remembering you're going to pay that fiddler down the road somewhere. But just wise management of your cash. I think this idea that we hit on earlier about cost dilution is really important. If you have this huge advancement, you've got to have throughput through it. Stocking rate is very, very important. We've got just a finite amount of land. We need to be using that land. If I'm paying for the electric bill in the factory, I need to produce as many widgets through the factory as I can. That's important, but we've got to do that in light of protecting our natural resources, which can be done through planned, time-controlled grazing. When I think about drought years, we may go into the spring, right, into the early summer, and be overstocked because it just flat didn't rain. We expected it to get some spring moisture. Really important for us in cool season grasses. We need rain in April and May, period. Sometimes it comes as snow, but we need moisture in that period of time. What if you get to that point and you're like, crud, I got more animals than I got grass. It just speeds up your rotation. You just get from point A to point B quicker. And we're not going to overgraze. We just may be weaning calves early and then making a decision with the cows. Do I move them off the ranch? Do I sell them? Combination of both. Do I buy hay? Put them on silage? Et cetera, et cetera. If it buys you some time there, but I'm not going to overgraze because I'm rotationally grazing. But we would rather deal with that than just be in some comfortable level of understocking, saying, "Oh, we can deal with the drought." We're not going to be as profitable as we want to be if that's our mentality. We think a lot about optimal use of our rangeland. What fits the best? We've worked quite a bit on this. This is a kind of a story we stumbled onto years ago. We started when we had kind of feed available. Said, what if we took replacement heifers out of the feed yard and turned them out on the native range in Montana, and just grew them on range, and it worked pretty good. And so this year, in this 2015 calf crop, we said, man, let's test this. So we left 1,000 head of heifers in the yard, turned 1,000 head out on range in Montana, fed them a modest amount of protein supplement. I drove through those cattle in February, early March that were out on range, drove through our feedlot, looked at our replacement heifers, and I thought, oh, crud. Those cattle on range had not grown very much. They'd grown some frame, but they were still pretty lean, looked like cattle you'd want to take to grass but not breed. But remember, in our system, we don't breed until July. We're May calvers, right? And so you have to consider your system. But when we turned those cows, so they weighed 660 pounds, the ones on range, versus 800 pounds out of the yard. But they gained a bunch of that back, just compensatory gain. Compensatory gain is animals eat to age more than they eat to body weight, right? So they're going to eat more, they gain better, and they did. And they made a big part of that weight up. If you look at their weights in AI in July, they had made up some of that differential, not all of it, but some of it. And that's pretty common to what we've seen with yearlings and other things when we've looked at that. But no difference in yearling pregnancy rate. The feed costs are really irrelevant. Those are old numbers. But the point is, we had lower feed cost out on rangeland, right? I mean, we were feeding just some protein supplement rather than full feed hay. Now, you'd have to evaluate in your system what it costs us to feed them versus to provide a little supplement and graze them and so on. But the point is, it was cheaper, which means it lowers our cost to put a replacement heifer in the herd. And whether you're on cash or accrual accounting, we're on managerial, accrual managerial accounting program. So in our system, when we book a heifer into our herd, it's booked at our actual cost, what it costs to raise that calf in her first year, the costs associated with her through that second year of getting her bred to calve with her first calf as a 2-year-old. All right, that gets booked. Then we assign a salvage value to that animal and depreciate it over 5 years. So let's say it costs us $1,200 to put a heifer in the herd. You got a salvage value of $700 assigned to them. Every year off of our income statement comes $100 off per head that was in that layer of animals. That makes sense? 500 head over 5 years. Well, you may be saying, well, I don't do my accounting that way. Either way, you're paying for it. There's an opportunity cost for your money, right? You could put it in the bank. You could invest it. You kind of have to look at it that way. And so we're thinking, maybe this is cool. Maybe we can really improve our profitability by lowering those costs of heifer development. And the other thing in my mind was, I think we can build a better cow. I think a heifer that's developed in a system that's more similar to what we're going to ask her to do when she's a cow is probably going to be in the herd longer. Well, we tracked that set of animals. That 2015 was their yearling pregnancy. Again, just very similar. But we tracked them out through 5 years and didn't really see any difference in pregnancy rate. So my hypothesis that we would build a better cow didn't really pan out. We built a cheaper cow, and that cow produced at the same level as those heavier developed as a yearling, up to yearling weights, right? They did just as good. They didn't do any better. Okay, so then it comes down to the systems question, like would that grass that those heifers grazed in the wintertime, would it have been more valuable to just leave them in the yard and have more cows grazing out? Again, stocking rate, optimal use of your rangeland. So we did a study with Montana State where we looked at a few different scenarios. We looked at full cow stocking heifers developed in the yard. We'll call that, say, the status quo. Developing heifers on grass, and the displaced cows fed hay, right? There's a number of cows that would have been grazing out that had, the calves ate that grass. Or reduce the cow herd to allow the heifers to graze and develop on grass. And so we didn't have that added hay feeding component to the cows. Looked at the allocation of the fixed versus variable cost, and the livestock depreciation was added back to the cost of calf. Because here's kind of what we found. It was interesting. When hay was cheap, this is cost of calf at year end, there wasn't really a difference between the different programs. But as hay got more expensive, i.e. feed got more expensive because you feed hay to the heifers in the feedlot and so on, the cheaper program was to reduce the number of cows and graze the heifers out on grass. But it wasn't a real large difference, was it? It wasn't a real large difference. We went on and did a further study where we looked, what if we looked at following the profitability of those all the way through our system? And it didn't come out much different. It kind of came out in the same order, but all of them were within 4% of the baseline of status quo. I mean, in our system, we weren't real sensitive to that. I look at this data and say, I know I can use this technique to lower my cost of replacement heifers, and I can use, if we add some extra feed or a really good year, it's a great way to use that grass to get a win-win. But I don't have maybe just a huge advantage to lowering our cow numbers. You know why? Because that throughput is so important to the system. See, it's about thinking about things from a systems perspective. Speaking of that, what can you control in your system? You can control the biological type of cow, size of cow, her milk production. You can control when you calve, when you turn on lactation, when you turn off lactation, by when you wean, and when you need to provide supplemental feed, i.e. hay feeding. So I just modeled this out just for the sake of showing you some differences. May calving system like ours, wean in early November, used energy content collected from samples in the northern plains. And I just looked at a moderate cow. I used to have said a moderate cow was a 1,100 pound cow. I'm like, I don't know, I don't see very many 1,100 pound cows out there. Say a 1,300 pound cow with 20 pounds of milk versus a 1,450 pound cow with 26 pounds of milk. Then I looked at their dry matter intake over the course of the year. It varies some due to forage quality and the stage of gestation or lactation, their physiological state. But the interesting thing was that the bigger cow in this modeling consumed an additional 1,900, about a ton of feed, additional ton of dry matter feed per year than that 1,300 pound cow. Just something to be aware of when you're thinking about biological type and getting the number of throughput through your system. I also modeled in this May calving system, what is the difference between what is supplied by rangeland, so that'd be the net energy requirement in black versus the supply from native forage. And what you see is we say, boy, you got a mismatch there out in the fall of the year where requirements exceed supply. Yeah, we do, and we're aware of that. In our system, though, we feel like matching that up in those expensive months in the winter where we have to feed hay and so on is more valuable to us, and we try to control that difference, that imbalance in the summer by good grazing management, by keeping cattle moved onto good fresh feed all the time. See how it all interrelates again? Now look at the bigger cow. That gap is wider, right? It's a wider gap. You just have to be aware of that. It doesn't mean it's all bad, but you're going to have a harder time making up that differential in our system. What about early weaning? We did this work years ago, 20-something years ago, where we took spring calving cows. This was in northern South Dakota, southern North Dakota, and we weaned calves in August, or we weaned them in November. And then we turned pairs out onto grass, or dry cows out onto grass, and measured forage use between August and November, difference in a dry and a pair. Hundreds and hundreds of samples crawling around in North Dakota, good night in the fall of the year. It wasn't fun, and still had so much biological variation. It was hard to overcome from a statistical standpoint. But overall, the dry cows used 73% the amount of forage, as did those pairs. So weaning, turning off lactation, can be a tool in dry years. It can be a tool to manage body condition. It can be a tool to manage forage supply. Talk real briefly about marketing, and then we'll get this wrapped up. I think about trying from a marketing standpoint, trying to behave differently than others in the industry, and trying to think about adding value to everything we do, developing relationships, and view it as part of the system. I like to be able to, let's tell our story. I think being able to talk about beef quality assurance and what, the attributes that come with that as a positive industry for our story, we could use that as positive industry for ourselves in marketing, and that we're taking care of our rangeland. I think you kind of look, in our system, we try to look for some diversity in marketing and just do not ignore risk management. In our system, all of our heifers are bred to Wagyu bulls, and we range calve them in May with the cow. They're in a separate management group, same time as the cows. We have no calving barns, no pull-in calves, none of that. We trot through them once a day when they're calving. We'll trot through the cows a couple times a week. Now we're moving pastures, so we get to see them some then. But that Wagyu program has allowed us to range calve and we've got those calves contracted always 2 years out as yearlings to a company that we work with. So I'll do a breeding contract in 2026 to deliver 8-weight F1 wags in 2028, if that makes sense. We retain some natural heifers to harvest. We have conventional yearlings, replacement bulls and heifers. We do a lot with futures. You can use it's complicated and it's volatile, but right now today, with this market where it's at, I may regret it. I've got 80% of our cattle locked in for 2026. We haven't sold a single one of them. I'm like, I'm not going to take the risk on the profit levels that we're at today. They're either forward contracted or they're hedged. That's my mentality. Some people are not that frugal. Look at the seasonality of the utility cow market. When do you sell cull cows? You look out, we preg test in the fall. You know, when we try to sell our cull cows is in March, when you're gonna get that bump in the seasonality of that market. Trying to take advantage of that, and we can add a couple 100 pounds to them on corn silage. We're also trying to sell as many bred cows as we can. So we'll take cows that are 8 years old and younger, and we'll keep bulls in with them, and we'll make fall calving cows. We calve in May and June. We'll create a July-August calving season, a September and October calving season, and then we'll sell those cows. And we have shown that we can add $300 a head selling those bred cows versus weigh-up prices. This isn't compared to selling a 6-year-old prime cow. This is compared to selling what would have been just a cull cow. We're just selling her as bred. We have repeat buyers, and it's working really well for them. This is our cost to put a replacement heifer in the herd. Same kind of trend as you saw in those calf costs. It's gone up, hasn't it? It's gone up. But the metric that we're wanting to look at from a cow marketing standpoint is a metric Burke Teichert put us on to about 15 years ago. It's the cull market cow value divided by replacement heifer cost. It's that ratio. What it cost us actually to put the heifer in the herd versus what we got in selling cull cows. It's a leading indicator of profitability. Am my cows leaving the system? Bringing as much as what it cost us to put them in the system. Obviously, there's market variation and droughts in the West and so on we dealt with in there, but our goal is to keep that ratio at 1-to-1. We've been able to be fairly successful with that. There were a few years during the drought it was a little harder to do. I'm going to close with kind of this family thing. Don't forget about your family. And the complication with family is, man, I love my family. I want us to be together. But the paradox that we have to manage is that a business is a business. A paradox is something that's seemingly opposite, but simultaneously true. And things like family glue, super important. Efficiency, very important. Tradition, innovation. Spontaneity, planning. Those type of things. I think it takes somebody in your system bold enough to go out and help manage this paradox and deal with your family to keep your business going for perpetuity. You can't just say, well, I love you enough, son, or I love you enough, daughter, I'm just going to turn it over to you. Get them prepared. Or say you're not ready. It may be your cousin that needs to run it for a while. So, just summarizing, how do we maintain success? Ranch with purpose. Put people first, track the important numbers, and look for leverage points. We use a lot of data and analytics. We try not to guess very much. We want to be fully stocked. We want to be frugal. We want to have excellent marketing, and we don't want to forget the family component. We think if we can do that our business can be in production for a long time. Just remember that cause and effect are different in time and space when you're making decisions. That's what's so hard about our business. They're distally and temporally distant. They're temporally distant, the cause and effect. And the other thing is there is no blame. I am responsible for our future. Appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
We'll take a couple of questions. If you have some burning questions for Trey, we'll have him back on stage at the end when we have he and our last speaker back on the stage, but we do have a question right here.
On your slide of developing heifers, you were showing 850 to 900 at AI. What is the mature weight on a 6-year-old cow at weaning?
Okay, good question. What's the weight of a 6-year-old cow if a guy was going to look at that ratio? And in our system, so a cow in moderate condition in the fall is going to weigh 1,300 pounds plus or minus 30 pounds.
The other part, how were you figuring land cost on your heifers that were grazed?
Yeah, that was pretty arbitrary. I used that as a lease rate we were paying at the time, but I would argue that land cost, a person would have to come up with that own number yourself, especially if you were going to go out and lease additional land to run those heifers. It would actually make that system's economics a little easier. You'd have to apply that cost, but that is a very, very real cost.
Take one more if you've got a burning question, right here.
What's your succession plan for your family?
Okay, the question was, what about the succession plan for the family? We're creating an onboarding process to try to make good owners of the younger family members. I spend, amazingly, I calculated the other day, I think I spend probably 30% of my time in education and outreach to ownership family. And the ownership family and the Scott family now is about 80-something people. And some of them, the older ones grew up on the ranch, have some sweat equity into it. Younger ones grew up in Billings or Denver somewhere, and they don't know squat about ranching. And so our goal is teach them. Let's get them engaged. Let's get them passionate about what we do in our industry. Get them excited about what we're doing from a conservation standpoint by the way we treat human beings and how we're being part of this food system in our country. So that we're just being intentional about trying to engage them. It's very difficult.
Thank you, Trey. Let's have another nice round of applause for Trey and his presentation.